Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me again today. This is your host, ID Jester, and we are covering the Advanced Squad Leader System in about 15 minutes. Hopefully, you've been able to follow along throughout this series. It should be noted that I am only kind of introducing a few of the rules at a time. And some of the rules I didn't really cover last time, we're going to cover in this episode. Last time we were talking about morale checks and what the rules are associated with morale checks and what happens during a morale check. And you notice that during a couple of our examples, some of the units pinned, some of them become broken. We talked about pin last time, but we didn't really cover broken. I kind of ignored that rule or glossed over it. And that's kind of how I'm doing this episode, because if I got to stop every few minutes and talk about a new rule that comes up, these episodes can't get done in about 15 minutes. So I'm trying to introduce a few new things each episode and then build on that for the future episodes. So this time we are going to be talking about units that break and what happens and what's the rules associated with them. So welcome to Part 10. Who says these rules are broken anyways? We're looking at Section A of the rulebook, subsection 10.4, broken units. Broken units are inverted and henceforth use the morale level printed on the reverse side for all morale checks or task checks and rally attempts that they make until they rally and they return to their normal side. So basically, if they rally, they're going to be flipped back over to their other side of the counter. Broken units may neither attack in any way nor move except to rout during the rout phase or to withdraw from close combat. So you can see that a broken unit basically becomes worthless to you in that it can't attack and it can't move except to rout away or to withdraw from close combat. So broken units are very bad. The last part of this rule, I'm just highlighted it because it is kind of important, but we're not going to cover it because we haven't talked about support weapons yet. But basically what this represents is units that break and that have to rout away during the rout phase are going to carry any weapons with them that they can that won't slow them down. And there's a rule associated with that here, and it shows you which ones they will carry and how much they're allowed to carry, etc., etc. And we'll probably look at this rule again when we get to support weapons, and we'll talk about when a unit breaks and they have a support weapon, what exactly is the rule associated with that. But I did want you to know that it was there, and it is important, but it's not something we're going to actually cover in this episode. 10.41, voluntarily break. Yes, you can voluntarily break your own units. Why you'd want to do this? Well, in certain situations, it might be advantageous for you to do this. But what's the rule associated with that? Units within both the line of sight and normal range of an armed, unbroken, known enemy ground and or adjacent to any unbroken enemy ground unit may voluntarily break, even if they're pinned. So at the start of the rout phase, they are able to rout during the rout phase. But they're only allowed to do this if breaking them will not cause their immediate reduction or elimination, which makes sense. Nobody's going to break themselves just to be eliminated or reduced. So you can break your units voluntarily if you want, but again, broken units may neither attack in any way, nor may they move except to rout. And most importantly is 10.62, desperation morale, DM counters. If you remember in our episode, and you can see here I've got a few of them on our counters already. This is the DM, which stands for desperation morale, and you can see it has a rally +4. Well, what are these counters that keep flopping on there whenever I go and break a unit? Well, let's look at that rule and let's see what it does. DM is a condition which affects any unit during the player turn it breaks, even if it breaks voluntarily, or an already broken unit which is subsequently attacked by close combat, white phosphorus, or enough firepower, taking into account the possibility of cowering, to possibly inflict at least a normal morale check result on the target. So basically what happens is when you become broken during that player turn, you're going to get this DM counter on you. A broken unit is also automatically under DM whenever a known armed enemy unit is adjacent to it, even if it does not end the phase adjacent to it, or when it starts a rout in open ground in the line of sight and normal range of an enemy unit. Place a DM marker on any unit under DM and remove it at the end of every rally phase. So these DM counters are going to stay on your counters, or stay on your units until the end of the next rally phase. So let's look at our example we got going on here. A couple things you can see. Basically, let me flip this guy back over and unbreak him. Basically, if a unit does an attack and the unit fails his morale check, he's going to break, and at that point you're going to break the unit, and you're going to flip it over to its reverse side, and you're going to place a DM counter on it. And when you do this, you will see, I'm just going to move the counter off for a second. On the back of the counter, you're going to see a number of silhouettes on it. If it has 3 silhouettes of guys kind of laying on the ground, that means it's a full squad. If it only has 2 silhouettes, it's only a half squad. And there are quite a few times that the back morale number will either be higher or lower than the front of the unit. So just because the front of the unit was an 8 does not necessarily mean that the back of the counter will be an 8. It depends on the nationality and the class of the unit. If we look at this American half squad here, if we look at the back of its counter, you can see that on the front it has a 6 morale. If we break this unit and flip it over, you notice it only has a 5 morale. So depending on the class of the unit, the different nationalities, they might have a different morale value on the back of the counter as opposed to what's on the front of the counter. And also you can, again, see if it's a full squad or half squad just by the number of guys laying. Let me break this guy again to kind of show you the difference here. Get out of the DM counter out of there. You can see that this one's got kind of 1, 2, 3. This one's only got 2. I know that this is a full squad. I know that this is a half squad. So that kind of shows you quickly, without having to flip the counters back and forth to find out whether or not it's a full squad, what squad is it, etc., etc. So that is desperation morale. We talked about this last time, but the rule associated with leadership is 10.7. I thought I would just add this time to kind of catch up on what we had learned last time. Leaders have a 2-number strength factor, which consists of the leader's morale at the bottom and his leadership die roll modifier at the top. An unbroken personnel leader may use its leadership rating to affect the performance of other personnel in its location. So again, if we look at our leaders, the first number on the bottom is going to be its morale. Second number is going to be its leadership die roll modifier. So in this case, it's a -1. We can see we have a 9 -1. We have an 8 -0. So in this case, this leader is not going to give you any bonus, but he's not going to give you any penalty. There are other leaders that would be 6 +1, etc. So they can actually be more detrimental than helpful in their leadership rating. And of course, the rest of that is in section 10.7. And you can put this on pause or look up that rule later on and take a look at what exactly, most of it was covered last episode. So let's talk about and show a couple examples here about what we were talking about. Some of the things that can possibly happen throughout the turn. I'm just going to kind of put these counters out of the way here. First thing to remember is anytime an enemy unit moves adjacent to you and you're broken, you will become DM again and you'll get another one of these DM counters. Also, to keep in mind, the DM counter does not affect any morale check you make. The only thing it affects is your rally attempt. In fact, it does say rally +4. So if this unit had a DM counter on it, it's broken. If it has to make a morale check, it is still a morale of 8. He does not have to take the penalty for the desperation morale counter on it. The desperation morale counter is only for rally attempts. So morale checks are just going to be normal. You just ignore that this counter is on the unit, and you're going to do a normal morale check, or whatever, 1 morale check, 2 morale check, or whatever ended up happening with the attack. The other thing to keep in mind is if you have a broken unit, Maybe this unit was broken the turn before, it tried to rally and it failed. So at that point, you're going to get your DM counter removed. And in fact, we're going to show you some rallying rules in the next episode to kind of follow up this episode and show you what rallying is and what that means and how it's done. In fact, we're going to use the same map, hopefully, and just kind of show you some different examples of what's going on and how units perform and do some rallying. Anyways, this unit is broken. He didn't rally, but his desperation morale counter goes off. The American player, let's say it's his turn and he's going to move his units. If he moves a unit adjacent to us there, if we're the German player, he moves a unit adjacent to us, all of a sudden we get another counter placed upon us. And of course, then when we have to rally, we're going to have a +4 again. So keeping your enemy units, those broken units with these desperation morale counters on them, very helpful because it's going to cause them to have a much less chance of rallying when they are able to rally. So moving adjacent to it is also going to do it. Or the other thing that could possibly happen, if we looked at our rules again, if you are able to do an attack against this unit and have enough firepower to actually result in a normal task check, a normal morale check. And what that means is you have to have enough firepower that actually you could roll a result of a normal morale check. So for example, if I only have firepower of 1 and I'm shooting with a green unit that doesn't have a leader with it, I know that I lose 2 columns. And because of that, if you watched our previous episode, we kind of showed you some examples on green units and conscript units. I would be off the table. So a green unit with only a firepower of 1 or 2 isn't going to do it for us because we're going to be moving down the fire column too far down. So there are some restrictions. You have to have enough firepower that actually can cause a normal morale check against the unit. If you do have enough firepower, again, by just shooting at it, let's assume that this guy doesn't have a morale check, or I'm sorry, desperation morale counter on it. If this 546 unit down here at S5 decides to shoot at it, it's got enough firepower that even if he doesn't do anything on the attack, he has enough firepower to cause another desperation morale counter to come on that unit. So moving adjacent to an enemy unit or firing at it with enough firepower that it would cause a normal morale check is enough to put another DM counter on this unit. And you can see quite a big difference. If I had an 8 morale, if I rolled a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, I would rally this unit with a desperation morale counter on it. You can see I can only roll a 2, 3, and a 4 on 2 6-sided dice. And yes, that's going to be quite difficult. So keeping these units, these enemy units with desperation morale counters on them, by either moving adjacent to them or firing at them, can be a very good strategy to keep these units several turns from rallying and coming back in. Last rule we want to talk about kind of quickly here was, where is it? Oh, here it is. Broken unit, which is automatically under DM whenever a known armed enemy unit moves adjacent to it. The other thing is, or when it starts a rout phase in the open ground in line of sight and normal range of a known enemy unit. So when it starts in the rout phase in an open ground in the line of sight and range of a known enemy unit. So we look back at our example here. We have these guys, we're just going to assume it's now the rout phase. And this guy, you can see, is in an open ground hex. And he has to get a DM counter put back on him. Well, we have to check and make sure that rule applies. You can see here that our units in P2 only have a range of 2, so 1, 2, so that I'm not within its normal range. And again, I'm kind of glossing over that rule because we haven't talked about attacks and normal range and extended range, etc. All the units here in O1 are broken, so he has no range there. But fortunately for the American player, his unit in S5 has a normal range of 4, so 1, 2, oh. So this unit started out in the open hex during the rally phase, during the route phase, and it automatically get a DM counter placed on it because it's in the line of sight and normal range of an enemy unit. We look at this unit over here in L5. Again, it is in a open hex, but fortunately for this unit, it is not within the normal range of any enemy units, line of sight and normal range of any enemy unit. So this enemy unit will actually not get a DM counter placed on it. So that's the difference in how that rule works and how it's associated. Place a DM marker on any unit under DM and remove it at the end of the rally phase. So these units, again, I think I covered this earlier, but just to make sure, when we do the rally phase, which will be the next episode coming up, these DM counters are going to stay on it. When this unit, at the end of the next rally phase, if it doesn't rally, it will lose its counter. It'll still say broken if it doesn't recover, but at least it gets rid of that desperation morale counter on it, and then it's up to the enemy player to either move adjacent to you, do an attack on you, or whatever to replace that DM counter on you. And you can see easily that a good strategy is going to be to try and get your broken units out of the line of sight of enemy units. Let's say if this enemy unit is broken back here, and we're going to talk about that when we eventually get into routing and what the rules are, and that's going to take probably a couple episodes because routing is pretty complex and it's pretty simple to understand. It's just complex in all the different rules that apply with routing units. But anyways, units that move out of the line of sight of enemy units or their attacks, it might take me a couple turns to get this guy recovered, but without having to keep placing this DM counter back on it because it's getting shot by enemy units or enemy units are walking up adjacent to it. Without that counter on, I got a much better chance of this unit rallying during the rally phase if it's out of the line of sight and not able to be attacked by enemy units. So that is how we break our units, and we're going to talk next episode about rallying these units. So be sure to stop in and watch part 11. Leave your thoughts, comments, and suggestions below, and we'll see you then.